Thank you. Thanks, Hamish. Wow, gosh, makes it sound really old when you lay it all out like that. um, I know I'm very big on your screen. That might seem a little bit strange to you. So I will try and keep my presentation larger than life to match. Just to say, I very much enjoyed that opening ceremony. I think it's a wonderful way to open our hearts and minds to get outside of the sort of daily thinking. I'm sure you did that over tea and coffee as well, because my talk is going to be really about trying to take that wonderful opening that we were given and use it as a platform to sort of keep you there at that sort of bigger level, that bird's eye view, you might say. We all need that. I'm fortunate enough to play a, a relatively unique role, having focused on the question of how we align organizations with a sustainable future for over 20 years, and very concertedly on that question, spanning lots of disciplines and lots of parts of sectors and organizations. So what I'm going to be doing today is to try to bring that to you, the sort of conclusion. And it was about 4 or 5 years ago, I was like, I'm not really hearing anything new here. I think we know what we're trying to bring about. I think we know what the problems are. It's just very difficult sometimes to pin those down in a clear way. So I hope, and I'm sure there's a lot that I could improve on that, and I'd love your feedback, but that's what I want to give you today. So thank you for having me here. This is, as I said, the high level view. Now, of course, you're responsible investors, so you're already starting, or you're interested in responsible investing. So you're already starting from a high bar, you might say. But even though my life is immersed in this topic, like I said, this reality check really matters. And that's because there is a massive gap. As human beings, there is a massive gap between what feels feasible, what feels like we can say to our stakeholders, what feels like what keeps us in the realm of normality, and then the real reality that's unfolding around us, and which we really and this reality, but actually we're not on this occasion. I'm just checking. Can you see me okay? Am I buffering a little bit, or am
Yeah,
I okay?
yeah, we got you. You buffered for just a moment there.
Okay, apologies for that. As long as you can hear me clearly, then I won't worry about that. Is that fair enough?
Yeah,
You can hear me.
yeah, we got you.
Perfect. Super. So moving to the next slide then. This is my summary view of where we're at. And as you'll see, finance is absolutely at the heart of this. So starting actually from the right-hand side, if we think about what happened during the pandemic, when a crisis hits, how far and how quickly society will hold up their hands and say, you know what, this is too complex, just make the decision and tell me what to do. Now we're seeing the crises from unsustainability, the degraded social and environmental systems that are really on their knees now, with humanity with toes over the precipice, you might say. I think the first thing we really need to acknowledge is the fact that we are potentially not far away from losing a market economy and moving to very much a command and control system. Because what's in play, even if we act quickly, if we don't act really quickly and in the right way, I think we will end up there because we'll get desperate. And so really this is a plea to say that firstly, that's unworkable. We know that people sat in a room making decisions is not going to work. It's inefficient, it's ineffective. We lose the freedom, efficiency, and democracy effects that we have with the market economy. But if we want to save a market economy and we want finance to be able to play its role, then we need to be really frank with ourselves about how the way that we are currently organizing the market economy and how we've concertedly organized it over the last number of decades has led to this situation that we now face, where we are threatened with moving to that ugly side of the equation. And unless we do that head on, and we transform the market economy to one that is fundamentally delivering for long-term well-being for all, in other words, the definition of sustainability and, in fact, the actual end goal of an economy, which is there to serve the well-being of society as a whole. Unless we can remember that and govern for it very concertedly and quickly, I think that's where we will be. So where we are at the moment, I just summarized that we have organized the market economy in a way that is resulting in unsustainability, and I'll go into that with a different diagram a bit more in a minute. But just to summarize very briefly, is that we have made the mistake, which we knew would be a mistake. We were told by Kuznets and others who orchestrated this system, that we should not over-rely on finance as a proxy for the end goals of the economy. But that is what we have done, because it's beautiful, it's simple, it makes life easy, and it's complex out there. So of course, there are lots of reasons why we might want to do that. However, we've reached endgame time. So we have a GDP economy. We have an economy optimized for financial income as a proxy for well-being. We have organizations that are delivering to optimize financial income. And we have human beings working in organizations that we assume are driven primarily by financial motives. And so when people talk about the hyper-financialization of life, of the economy, this is what they mean in terms of breaking down. And I'm sure that you all recognize this system and it doesn't matter even what part of the world that you're in, because ultimately this system has been embedded within our governance architecture globally, and its reaches are also way beyond business. This is the vortex within which universities, government, and other organizations are pulled. If we want to preserve the market economy, then it is my belief that what we are all saying is that we need to move towards, at the macro level, a well-being economy. You can also call it a purpose-driven economy, but the well-being economy is a very established concept that is essentially doing nothing more than actually accounting for and strategizing to the end goal of the economy, as always was, and kind of shedding a lot of those really unhelpful assumptions about how the machine of the market works automatically to result in well-being. Now, of course, you can have policy that tries to govern for that, but ultimately what brings that about is organizations, including government as an organization. And so what we need are purpose-driven organizations whose strategic reason to exist, the value generation point of what they do, is specifically anchored to long-term well-being for all people and planet, i.e. sustainability, i.e. the end goal of the economy. And in doing that and focusing on that meso level, we unleash meaningful work, as in human beings that are primarily, we're driven by many motives, but what we have forgotten is that primarily we want to act in service of the other, if given half a chance. That warm glow we get when we even pick up a pencil for another. We know that are absolutely crying out for that to be unleashed. But the point at which we need our organizations, because we have the mother of all issues going on, we need our organizations to be unleashing the meaningful work through purpose-driven organizations in order to solve these problems, is the point at which we are still doing the opposite. And we have to grasp, my main message is, we don't grasp that, we don't grasp this, I really think we're not going to get there. So I'm now going to just zoom in on this meso level, because it's the unlock for the micro level and also the macro level. And to do that, I'm going to use a modified Daly triangle. So Herman Daly was perhaps the original ecological economist. He worked very closely with Donella Meadows, who you may know from MIT, who wrote Limits to Growth, amongst other things, a very, very clever systems thinker who's written extensively on the topic. And both of them came to the conclusion that this triangle, or an earlier version of it, is the best way, this triangle is the best way to encapsulate what it is to have a sustainable economy. Now, they operated at that macro level, that sort of policy making, governmental governance level. But what the work that I have been doing in terms of observing, I'm merely a funnel for what I believe we're all saying, is to take that and adapt it to the meso level, because ultimately the meso level is is nested within this larger level, and they're all part of the economy. So I don't know if you can, I hope you can see the words on there. I'm going to take us through it briefly. If not, please do just say, and you don't have to look at me, you can look at the slide. So maybe just, I'll just pause there if you want to put your hand up if you'd like to see the slides bigger. Yeah, okay, great. Because it's important, and you don't really need to look at me for this bit. So what we have, and the key insight from Daly, was that the unsustainable economy is essentially locked into the middle of the triangle. And what that means is that we are focused, the ends of the economy, and by extension, the ends, the goals of organizations, are fixed on essentially financial and manufactured capital. These are derived capitals. And the key way that what we then account for and govern and manage as the key resource to do that is also financial and manufactured capital. So if we think about all the systems, everything that the law, what that points us to, what it says the role of business is, how we're governed, the systems, the legal structures, they all sit around this middle of the triangle. Because what we essentially have said to business and organizations is you focus on that. And of course, and I don't have time to go to it now, I'm sure you know, it's because of the assumptions we have about how the market machine will just therefore do its thing and well-being will pop out at the end. So we focused our innovation nerve center on this middle of the triangle. In doing that, that means that the ends of the economy, long-term well-being for all, are out of sight. But more than that, you could even say they were off limits, because the way that we understand the assumptions of the market economy are that organizations shouldn't be concerned with well-being directly. They shouldn't be trying to measure it, influence it, because that would be a market failure. Actually, what organizations should be doing is reading preferences in the market and then delivering on them. Of course, the issue is that that system is co-opted, particularly within marketing, because there's no way of regulating and curtailing the self-interest motive in order to manipulate those preferences. So there's a huge amounts of power, especially in what I will say is a postmodern economy, not going into that, but it's critical, because the power without responsibility of organizations to shape society is massive. But what is also, so not just is the innovative goal out of sight, so we are not pointing our organizations in the innovative, efficient, effective direction, but what's at the bottom of the triangle is off balance sheet. Now, this is when people talk about sustainability, this is the bit they tend to focus on. So one of the key points is that we have to look at the whole, but this is a really critical point, that the natural, human and social capital, the non-financial capitals, have been off balance sheet. And we know that. They're externalities. And that is the frantic work that's going on at the moment with ESG reporting, etc., in order to try to do a couple of key things, to get those non-financial capitals onto the balance sheet in some way, shape or form. And I mean, even before ESG, I mean, the sense that, you as an organization rely on these other capitals, and you really should understand whether they're in a healthy state of stocks and flows. But this is not something you're obliged to do. So it's always been, in fact, the law in many ways has kind of curtailed and made that difficult to do because we've been forced into the middle of the triangle. But what sits beneath that sort of organizational level stocks and flows are, of course, these base environmental and social systems that are the base value on which everything else is built. And that could be social cohesion, trust. We don't value these things, but they are systematically being undermined, as well as, of course, the whole suite. And that is not just climate change. And we need to get very real about this, that in there falls, we could take planetary boundaries, donor economics, which draws from planetary boundaries. We could take the SDGs because they're mostly an expression of thresholds. And what really we're talking about here is a sense of multiple issues, from water scarcity, antimicrobial resistance, soil erosion, ocean acidification, air pollution, climate change, biodiversity loss. These are multiple issues that have been perpetuated over time as we have not valued these core assets. And so there's a scramble to try to do something. And the key message I have is that if we, and we'll go into this, I think, in the Q&A, is that if we don't get real about that and we don't put all of the issues on the table at once, then we are going to be reinventing our business models. And that is going to be very painful. In fact, I think we'll just kill organizations in bureaucracy anyway. So again, we'll come to that. What we have are organizations, and maybe you fall into that category, maybe as issuers, maybe as investors, because you're also organizations, of course, as well as choosing who you invest in, where we are now moving to a sense of we need to move to the long term. So the narrative of long-term decision making, this is the issue. Everything else about the market economy and business as usual thinking about it is fine. The well-being machine works, but what we need to do is to think long-term, because if we think long-term, then we can create a business case for bringing and distributing investment and value in order to create the health of these means. And I think that is absolutely critical. It brings in stakeholderism. Stakeholder capitalism starts to come in here because you actually start to care about the health of your stakeholders instrumentally in order for your long-term financial self-interest. But what's also going on beyond that is that some organizations, in seeing the wood for the trees, in seeing the bigger picture that I presented earlier, are saying, you know what, I don't think that a financial business case is A, motivating enough for ourselves and our stakeholders, and B, is going to give us the expansive innovation context in order to be able to really be front foot and tackle these issues. So yes, we need to do the compliance around thresholds at the bottom of the triangle. And I'd say, again, that is something I don't think we've really absorbed that properly, even many purpose-driven organizations. But what organizations that are purpose-driven are doing is saying, no, we are going to actively move our strategic pinnacle line of sight from financial income, and so from our self-interest to other serving interest. And finance is a critical, or let's say financial capital, is an absolutely critical means to that end. But it stops being an end in itself, which of course finance can never be an end in itself. It is by default a symbolic good. Before I continue, I just want to check, Hamish, because my timer stopped. How many minutes do I have?
Yeah, we have about 5 minutes left, so we're going to have to cruise through. Yeah.
That's fine. No. I've said the major things, so this is good. So the reality is that we then need to get really serious about what we mean. If we want to bring about a purpose-driven well-being economy serviced by purpose-driven organizations and unleashing meaningful work and meaningful lives, then we need to govern it. And the two key areas we need to focus on are governance and marketing, including as finance organizations, because governance sets the frame, it sets the direction, the ends, and the parameters for decision making at the bottom of the triangle. That's the direction part. It does the oversight as to whether that's working, and it's accountable for that. But you can have all the structure in the world. You then need to deliver it through innovation in partnership with stakeholders. And that's where marketing, not in the sales version, which is in itself a consequence of being in the middle of the triangle, but marketing in its full sense of value generation. And so luckily, we have been at work globally to start to pin down these accountability frames where we can start to get clearer about that. Maybe you could just go to the previous slide a second. So if that's okay, thank you. Which is to say that one of the, and I have another slide in a second on this, we talked about PAS 808 on purpose-driven organizations, and in it is a wealth of things, and I really encourage you to read it, if nothing else, because this should be going to ISO level within the next few months, we hope, and our bidding process. And this is the opportunity to mobilize and activate the world in a very action-orientated way to say, what does PAS 808, but expressed as a world, what does the improvement of that look like? What is the gold standard of governing and managing for a well-being economy? And the definition that's in PAS 808, which will go up for global scrutiny, is that an organizational purpose, but you could say project, individual, team, department, brand, is a reason to exist that is an optimal strategic contribution to the long-term well-being of all people and planet. So you get that strategic alignment. Next slide, thanks. And so, but a precursor to that British standard in purpose-driven organizations was that sort of broader frame around governance. Like I say, it took 5 years. There were 77 countries involved, 25 liaisons, including many international organizations that you will know, including UN bodies and others. And it was signed off eventually by 164 countries. You can see here the map of those who were involved. And it essentially puts purpose as the primary principle at the center, with 10 other principles that work to around that as a coherent governance system. Again, I really encourage you to look at that. It's sort of triple lock sustainability, and it's the first time that we have an understanding of governance in really quite detailed practical terms that is relevant for any organization, from one person to the largest organization, to government, to charities, to whatever, in all parts of the world. So we have language that also works for all parts of the world. So I do encourage you to lean on that. Okay, so moving then down to 2 slides, please. Let's go down one. So yes, maybe just up one a second. I'll just show you. You can look at PAS 808. That's what it's called. And interestingly, it starts with worldviews, not just principles, because it's all very well and good to say, let's apply some principles. But if your fundamental assumptions about the world do not align, you're unlikely to. So I think you should find that interesting as well for yourselves and the people that you're investing in. And then next slide, please. I'm almost there. You might want to expand this one. This just to give you a sense of what's out there. And at the end of this presentation are lots of things you can delve into, lots of writing and evidence that I have to help you unpick this further. But this was a really interesting survey. Now it's one of those dynamic surveys. So you click on that link now and they've changed it. But this is what it was in 2020. And they surveyed 1,300 CEOs globally, to ask them which of the following best describes your view of the overall objective of your organization. So this is a sense of to what extent are people in logic 1, the middle of the triangle, in logic 2, middle and bottom, enlightened self-interest, long-term self-interest, or in purpose. And we can see there quite clearly that we have that are actually in the enlightened perspective. So, and I'm just checking the figures. So 69% said that they want to embed purpose in everything they do to create long-term value. And we know under business as usual, that means financial value. Actually, 11%, only 11%, were saying that their primary overall objective was to deliver economic returns to state shareholders. And 21% were leaning into purpose, that their primary objective was public interest and to improve society. So this is a very interesting sense of anonymously what CEOs will say that they think they're doing. And I think this gives a sense of where we're going. So I'll finish there. I think I'm on time. That was another 5 minutes. It's a set of provocations, but it comes from deep observation of what I've seen happening in the past, where we are, but also where I genuinely think we are going, but that we need to go at speed. And I think we'll cover this in a minute, but we really need finance to be leading this, because as you can see, it's finance that in many ways is in the driving seat of a hyper-financialized economy.